Chapter 8 9S's Story Pilgrimage. He saw a dream he didn't want to see, rather lucid and unpleasant, his memories of reality. After 9S was forcefully removed from battle, the flight unit had landed in the city ruins. Because the black box response had previously rid the area of infected Yoha squadron troopers and machines alike, it had the least amount of enemy signals and was probably deemed to be the safest. "Search for 2B's black box signal!" That was the first thing he had ordered after he landed. 2B's plan had been to be a decoy and let 9S escape. But 2B should have attempted an escape once 9S's flight unit had gone out of sight, if she hadn't been shot down.
Report. 2B's black box signal detected.
Where? Give me the location data! But Pod did not display the map data.
Warning. Significant vibrations detected. Underground support seems unstable. Possibility of a large-scale earthquake.
So what? Replied an irritated 9S. Where's the location data?
Recommendation. Immediate evacuation.
There's no way I would evacuate! The location data appeared. The commercial ruins. Good. It was close. 9S ran. He crossed the shallows, dove through weeds, and stumbled across rubble. Just as Pod had forewarned, the ground was trembling. He couldn't care less, and kept running. He crossed a rope bridge draped across a deep canyon. 2B was right up ahead. There! 2B! It was a familiar ID signal and silhouette from the back. But she was not alone. She was with someone else. 2B, are you? His feet froze. There was something protruding from 2B's back. Something red and pointed. 2B said as she looked back, impaled by her sword. No. 2B! No! 2B's body collapsed to the side. A2 had a blood-soaked sword. 2B lay motionless on the ground. He couldn't detect her signal. No! She had killed 2B, that old Yorha model, A2. His throat trembled uncontrollably. He was going to kill her. The rope bridge was swinging. He was going to kill her. He was going to kill her. He was going to kill... The feeling of falling. He lost sight of A2. His body was slammed down. It became pitch black. His dream abruptly ended, and the darkness cleared. Inside his bright field of vision was a red blob.
Oh, looks like he woke up, Devola.
The red blob split in two. Two redheads. If he remembered correctly, there were some androids with red hair.
Good morning. You slept well, 9S. You know, sweetie, you've been out for 2 weeks.
This voice. He remembered. Devola and Popola. The twin androids who did odd jobs at the resistance camp. They aren't wearing casts today. 9S thought absent-mindedly. These two were constantly wounded, and plastered themselves with casts and bandages all the time.
Be grateful that I found you, okay?
Teased Devola. 2B had told him earlier that Devola's scanner had helped her enormously when searching for 9S when he had been abducted by Adam. 2B. He almost relapsed into the nightmare. That was a dream. A bad dream. 9S stood up. Where's 2B? Popola averted her gaze without a word. Devola's jaunty expression disappeared, turning grim. You should know, shouldn't you? This place was not a part of the dream. It was the resistance camp in reality.
Her black box signal is... gone.
I see. It wasn't a dream. A2 had killed 2B. Since the bunker was gone, neither a spare cases nor personal data backup was obtainable. A body to return to, and memories to return, were all gone. Was this death? He couldn't tell. He couldn't think clearly. His mind lagged at the scene in front of him and his memories diverged. Words were the only thing that skimmed along his consciousness. The truth was so surreal. It felt like he was seeing through someone else's eyes. Pod popped into his field of vision.
Devola and Popola type androids are rare models specialized for treatment and maintenance. Prediction that with the absence of the bunker, without their help, 9S's repair would have proved difficult.
He couldn't understand anything he was told.
Recommendation? Gratitude.
Ah, yes, that was true. Thanks. Really? Was he thanking them? He didn't know. Nothing mattered, and he felt dejected. There were a lot of our types in the past, Devola had said, handing 9S his goggles. Perhaps everything looked different because his goggles were off. Apparently, we were in charge of managing a large system. It was no use. Putting on the goggles made no difference. Even the familiar resistance camp looked washed out. What do you mean by apparently? He held back his despair and questioned in a mechanical tone. Our memories from that time were erased, so we don't know what happened. Our model went rampant and caused an accident in the past. Most of our peers were resident, and after that. He was hearing the words, and probably understanding them as well, but they did not settle with him. He was thankful that he didn't have to talk. We weren't resident because... This time, Popola spoke. We are being watched, so that we don't lose control again. Accident, rampage, watch. Any other time he would have loved to investigate further. An overreactive curiosity is a bad habit. He heard Tubi's words in his head, clearly and very realistically. But thanks to that, we're able to save comrades like you. That's a way of atoning for our sins. Devola's voice was distant, even though she was right in front of him. It was strange. Devola and Popola were standing next to him, yet their voices were not as clear as the absent Tubi's voice in his head. Where was he? Was the ground he stood on real? Don't push yourself too hard, 9S. Hearing Popola's words from behind, 9S realized that he had stood up and started to walk away. What is this? After leaving the resistance camp, 9S stared up at the object in awe. Normally, there was only sky where he looked because there was no buildings in the crater zone. But there was a strangely shaped thing extending toward the sky, looking like a twisted white cylinder.
A massive structure originating from the underground cave.
Pod seemed to have interpreted his utterance as a question and gave an answer.
Speculated to be doing of the machines, but details are unavailable.
Machines. They were the culprits behind infiltrating the server, infected the Yoha squadron troopers, and destroying the bunker. 9S ran toward the crater zone. I'll destroy them, he thought. A2 had destroyed 2B, but the machines were responsible for making that a final death. If there had been a spare cases and personal data backup, 2B could have returned to life. What happened during the 2 weeks I was asleep? 9S asked Pod as he ran. Popola had said, You know, sweetie, you've been out for 2 weeks. He could guess how severe the damage was. 9S only remembered up until he had screamed in fury.
Report? An earthquake manifested along with the appearance of the massive structure. 9S was affected by the collapse of the ground and plummeted into the resulting valley. Both cases and system were damaged. Valley?
Devola came all the way there?
Hypothesis. She was there to acquire region-specific materials.
He had heard that the odd jobs Devola and Popola took up were tasks that were dangerous, required distance expeditions, and were in general things nobody else wanted to do. That's our way of atoning for our sins. They were most likely referring to the accident that mentioned earlier. But to 9S they seemed too remorseful. Had their sins been that grave? Had it not been his imagination that the other androids treated the pair with a certain coolness? Regardless, even if he knew the answer, he wouldn't be able to help the twins. Perhaps their punishment was too severe for their sins, but if the twins desired that punishment, there was nothing he could do. And where's A2? The location of the enemy 9S wanted to punish the most. It was invaluable information.
Current location, as well as operational status, is unconfirmed.
Roger that. On one hand, 9S wanted her to be dead, and on the other he wanted her alive. He wanted to kill A2 with his own hands. The vague status of the report probably took his feelings into account. His lips felt out of place. The corners of his mouth were pointing up. There was nothing funny, but he was smiling. But 9S earnestly thought that it was appropriate. The massive structure that appeared in the crater zone was not the only one. There was one structure so high that it punctured the clouds, and 3 surrounding structures not as tall. The smallest structures were cone-shaped, looking like horns growing out of the ground. Running down a debris-filled slope, 9S made his way toward the central structure. He ignored the cone-shaped counterparts. The differences in height surely signified differences in importance.
Transport mechanism detected inside the protruding portion of the massive structure.
Transport? Is it an elevator?
Affirmative.
If the machines had taken the time to construct an elevator, that meant that the structure was meant to be climbed up and down. 9S briefly wondered what the purpose of the building was, but the thought disappeared right away. Either way, he was going to destroy it. What was the point of understanding its purpose? But it didn't go as smoothly as planned. Reasonably, but the structure was surrounded by a barrier. Since it wasn't penetrable by force, 9S tried to hack the wall, but this again was thwarted easily. Then a high-pitched voice, almost as if it were mocking 9S, was broadcasted down to him.
Hello, this is the tower system service.
The manner of speech reminded 9S of an impudent child. The voice was higher than that of an adult woman. Now that he thought about it, it sounded similar to the little girl and boy, prepubescent voice samples that research and development had been working on.
We apologize. To access the main unit of the tower system, please unlock the subunits. We apologize for the trouble. Thank you for your cooperation.
It seemed like the massive structure in the middle was called the main unit, and the surrounding cone-shaped structures were called the subunits.
Question. Why would the machines make such an announcement?
There's no logic behind what they do. It was stupid, but he couldn't force his way through. He had to follow their steps. 9S took out a sword and slashed the so-called subunit. Along with a strong electrical discharge, his sword bounced back.
Hello, this is the tower system service. An access key is needed to access the subunits. Unfortunately, we are unable to give you access.
The voice was amused. It reminded him of the machine that had possessed 6-0 at the bunker and repeated,
This is so fun. This is so fun. As compensation for first-time users, we will provide a complimentary tour of the resource recovery unit.
9S felt a noise. Neither transmission nor display. It was an uncomfortable feeling, like his mind had been grazed with sandpaper.
We look forward to your next visit from the bottom of our hearts.
What was that? 9S held his temples.
A force transmission from the enemy system. Transferred the location of the so-called resource recovery unit.
Pod displayed the location data. The same thing was displayed on 9S's goggles. So apparently he would have to get the access key from this place and access the 3 subunits before the main unit was unlocked. They're playing with me. Even though he resented having to play along with the machines, with no method of destroying the structures from the outside, he had to infiltrate and destroy them from the inside. 9S sighed deeply. To the Forest Kingdom for now. That was the location of the resource recovery unit. He wanted to get the steps over with to destroy the tower in the crater zone.
Recommendation? Meet with the resistance troops and review available directives.
Directives? Who cares? He was going to exterminate the machines and kill A2. Nobody had directed him to do so. It was something he had decided for himself. 9S passed through the commercial ruins and entered the Forest Kingdom. It hadn't been long since he had been here with 2B, since their pointless conversation. How about this? Once it's peaceful, let's go shopping together. I'll even buy a t-shirt that looks good on you, 2B. A t-shirt? Oh, you don't want it? No. When that day comes, let's go. Really? It's a promise. Yeah. He hadn't been serious. and 2B probably hadn't been either. It was just unimaginable for the fighting to end and for it to be peaceful. But he had looked forward, just a little bit, to the possibility of that happening. For humans to come back to Earth and reconstruct the commercial district. For humans and androids to coexist and walk through the city. Just thinking about it made him giddy. Would 2B get mad if he chose a t-shirt with an awful design? Would she look embarrassed? Or would she laugh? He wanted to make 2B laugh one day. He wanted to see 2B roll on the ground, laughing her heart out. But humans would never come back to Earth, and 2B had died. The Yoha squadron had fallen, and the fighting still continued. Nothing had changed. But then again, everything had changed. 9S shot down a machine that jumped out to attack with Pod's artillery. It was a survivor of the Forest Kingdom.
Revenge for our king.
Other machines pounced at him from between the trees. It was A2, not 9S, that had killed their king, but it probably made no difference to them.
I'll kill you.
He hacked the persistent machines and made them explode. I'll kill you. That's my line. Worthless machines, he mumbled. Machines taking revenge? It was so absurd it almost made him laugh. Once he was on high ground, he saw a floating, building-like structure. It was deformed, covered in bulges, and of a grey, leaden color. Is that?
Affirmative. Believed to be the so-called Resource Recovery Unit. Unlike the massive structure in the crater zone, it seems to be distributing something.
What do you mean, something?
Hypothesis? A type of resource, but details are unavailable.
Since it was called the Resource Recovery Unit, if it was collecting and distributing anything other than resources, it would be a misleading name indeed. It was, however, possible that what the machines considered resources could be, to androids, nothing but a pile of garbage. I wonder what they're going to use the collected resources for.
Unknown.
He wasn't really curious, so he didn't mind if it was unknown. He was going to destroy it anyway. He remembered that he used to have a fascination with machines, even though they ended up being just another thing he would destroy. Why had he been so eager to study them? He wasn't sure, even though the question was about himself. As he approached the Resource Recovery Unit, an announcement came out of nowhere. It was the same voice he had heard in the crater zone. Undiscernible as a little girl's or little boy's voice, it was nevertheless a foolish-sounding voice.
Hostile android approaching. Switching to self-defense mode.
The Resource Recovery Unit, which had been erratically moving through the air, suddenly stopped. The bulges on the wall began to loudly change shape. They kept changing shape without an endpoint, as if they were playing around. On top of that, a part of the shifting wall expanded to reveal an opening that looked something like an entrance, as if it were taunting him to come inside. What self-defense mode? He thought bitterly. Are these patterns? Characters? Right above the door-like opening, there were some symbols inscribed into the wall. They were roughly the same size, distinctly shaped, and evenly spaced.
Answer. They are characters of angelic script, an ancient alphabet.
So he had been right when he thought they looked like characters.
The characters in question spell out the words meat box.
What does that mean?
Unknown.
I know. There's no logic behind what they do. They fight, kill, and mimic. All irrationally. Those words were probably meaninglessly inscribed as well. When he went inside, his suspicions were further confirmed. There were enemies stationed in various places, but that was the same as the factory ruins in Forest Kingdom. Arbitrarily placed enemies were defeated to move forward. The androids were asked to repeat the same action every time. But unlike the factory ruins in Forest Kingdom, the inside of the meat box was rather clamorous. The attacking machines kept making hideous noises.
Revenge. Ow, 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 ow. I don't wanna die. It hurts. Hurt.
9S kicked over the bodies that were filled with holes from Pod's artillery. How could a machine be hurting? The cylindrical remains rolled down the spiral staircase. That was irritating too.
I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die.
Every last one of them, thought 9S. Couldn't they attack more quietly? They weren't even that strong.
I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, 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 scared.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! 9S started to shout, wanting to drown out the meaningless noises. He shouted while fighting, took turns shouting and fighting, and made his way up the floors. This was what he'd been doing this whole time, destroying machines. That was all, but why did he feel so aggravated? Shut up! Be quiet! Die! Why did he feel so empty? The only difference was whether or not Toby was next to him. Eventually, as all things come to an end, the fighting inside the structure also ceased. He had reached the roof. It was painfully bright, perhaps because he had been fighting in dim light. As he squinted and looked around, he saw something being sucked out from the inside of the building and distributed toward the sky. Are those machine parts? Countless metal parts spiraled around like a tornado, rising and disappearing into the sky. They were being distributed toward the crater zone.
Hypothesis. Resources for the massive structure, or perhaps resources to create a weapon.
Collecting the remains of fallen comrades in battle and transporting them to the massive tower in the crater zone. That was what this facility was used for, if Pod's hypothesis was correct. If so, what was the point of leaving the access key in a place like this? Leaving an object that would help destroy the massive structure in a facility made to gather materials to maintain the massive structure. It was contradictory, to say the least.
Help. Please. Help.
It was the voice of a child. There was a glowing orb on the middle of the roof. The wavering voice was coming from it. What's that?
Answer. Core. The entity that controls this facility. In other words, the brains of this facility.
The voice repeated its pleas for help. The whole time, bits and pieces of machines were still being dragged out and pulled across the sky.
Help me. I'm scared. Help.
They could say whatever they wanted. They were machines. The words they said were predetermined. It wasn't like this one was in fear and pleading for its life. It was just playing a pre-recorded sound according to its program.
Energy charged. Close firing mode. Full power.
Pod transformed. 9S pointed at the core. Pod started to say,
9S.
Like it was trying to stop him, but 9S ignored it. Shoot! The white laser emitted by Pod burned through the core. The ground shook. Shockwaves passed through the whole resource recovery unit, but the waves passed and it quickly quieted down.
Report. Obtained the access key from the destroyed core.
Leaving something necessary to destroy the system in a facility used to maintain the same system. The only reason he could think of why this contradiction existed was to play with him. Worthless machines, spat out 9S. He turned around. There were still 2 remaining resource recovery units. He needed to get to them as soon as possible. 9S was torn between heading first to the flooded city or to the amusement park ruins. After some consideration, he chose the flooded city, while the transfer devices could still be used. While the road to the amusement park ruins had been shattered, there were multiple routes and was close to the crater zone. On the other hand, there was only one route to the flooded city, which was through the underground waterway. There was a possibility that the dilapidated waterway could collapse. And now that the research and development team was dissolved, he wasn't sure how much longer the transfer device would be serviceable. That had been his reasoning, but perhaps it was just a hunch. There were some disintegrated remains of a flight unit in the shadows, stuck nose first into the sand. Something struck him in the moment he saw the debris. Pod? Is this? Various parts had been melted from high heat and bullets had disfigured the frame. But there was no mistaking this unit. Not this one.
Affirmative. Yoha Squadron Trooper 2B's ID detected among this unit's remains.
2B had landed here. That meant that she had made her way through the underground waterway into the city ruins, followed the shrubbery along the flooded city, and crossed the bridge, to end up at the forest clearing. If only he had gotten Tubi's location data earlier, he might have been able to catch Tubi while she was still here. At least, before Tubi had crossed the bridge. No, maybe even just before she had run into A2. He didn't want to think about what had happened after that.
Report. Unsent transmission detected from the flight unit's memory storage.
9S heard a familiar voice after he told Pod to play the transmission.
This is Yoha, Squadron Trooper 2B. If anyone is listening to this, I'd like you to pass something on. If you see Yoha, Squadron Trooper 9S, I'd like to tell him.
Whether because of damage to the memory storage device or from poor conditions during the actual recording, the transmission suddenly cut off. Right as he thought the message was over, 2B's voice became audible again over the static.
I apologize. The message for him is, 9S, the days I spent with you were like rays of sunshine in my life. Thank you, 9s.
9S was frozen in place.
That is all,
Pod said. Pod's attempt at spurring 9S did not work. He was still unable to move.
Tubi. She called me 9s.
He wished he had heard her say it in person. How he wished he could hear a living Tubi call him 9s in an animated voice, instead of a overstatic fill transmission. Tubi was no longer here. Tubi was no longer anywhere in this world. He was struck by reality. By none other than Tubi's own voice. His vision was blurred. His vocal cords trembled.
What a pointless thing to do,
he thought. He told himself there was more important things to do. Destroy every last one of the machines, and kill A2. 9S stood up, and headed toward the resource recovery unit. He ran. He sprinted. He didn't want to waste a minute. No, not even a second, in destroying the machines. But inside of the building labeled Soul Box in angelic script, it was completely silent.
There are no enemies?
The facility was constructed identical to the meat box out of machine parts. It also had an atrium and an elevator used to travel up and down the building. Only the variously stationed machines were missing.
Is this elevator broken?
They're telling me to hack it. It was slowly starting to understand the enemy's childlike tendencies. As expected, after he hacked and disarmed the system's security, the elevator began to move. Again, the next floor was devoid of enemies, and only accommodated a hacking point. It was intentionally made to look like a treasure chest and placed conspicuously in the center of the room. They were stubbornly foolish. Furthermore, the treasure chest did not only serve as system security, but actually contained treasure, information inside. The first treasure chest contained blueprints for the tower in the crater zone. The tower was not simply a monument, nor solely a trap for androids. It had an exit portal, which also served as a launch pad. At that size? And it was obviously not for intercontinental launches, but rather designed for ships capable of escaping Earth gravity well.
Is it aimed at the moon? A massive cannon aimed at the human server?
He looked at Pod. He wanted it to reject his hypothesis. Even if humans were extinct, their genetic profile data was stored on the moon. If that was destroyed, then absolutely nothing would remain of humans.
Due to lack of information, neither denial nor affirmation is possible.
Shit.
If he explored the other floors, he might be able to find the rest of the information. 9S entered the elevator. But the enemy was not so generous as to give him the information that he wanted. That was how enemies operated. The next treasure chest was a prime example. As soon as he deactivated the security system, he was exposed to information he did not want to see. Information related to Yoha androids.
A black box?
The black box was a powerful energy source, and true to its name, not even the squadron troopers knew its origins. Not even Type S androids, who were directed to perform research. That was why 9S never even thought about what the black box was composed of.
That can't be!
It might be misinformation, to unsettle him. That was the only explanation.
The Your Squadron black boxes are made from machine cores?
That was impossible. It couldn't be. To think he was made from his own enemies. 9S kicked the chest aside in fury. The enemy wanted to rattle him. Even now, there was probably one of those clowns watching him, sniggering at his every move. He moved on to the next floor, reminding himself not to be fooled so easily. Technically speaking, all the information was given to him by the enemy. He was at fault for believing them. The information regarding the launchpad was dubious as well. He hacked the next chest, this time determined to stop being so gullible. The usual white expanse enveloped him. He disengaged the program's attack mechanism and waited for the security to deactivate.
Huh? That's weird.
Did this treasure chest have better security than the others? 9S started to roam through the white virtual circuit dimension. At times a black wall would appear, but it was easy to destroy. The security didn't seem like it was meant to keep him out.
What is this?
9S stared at his own hand. Something was off. While hacking in the circuit dimension, one's physical body was never visible. Instead, it was displayed as a shape or a signal, while the enemy's program was displayed as a black sphere or cylinder. This was done to optimize the hacking process, making program invasion and subroutine destruction of the program more efficient. But right now, 9S could see himself. He could see the arms and legs he was used to seeing. And if he had a mirror, he would most likely see the face he was used to seeing in real life.
What is this dimension?
The white walls abruptly turned into screens, flooded with various images.
Are these my memories?
Memories of his first flight unit training, his first Earth descent mission, his first encounter with a machine, his first time meeting with 2B.
Why are my memories here? Why do they know all of this?
He briskly walked through the white passageway. There was a white door. He reached for it. It was unlocked. Through the door was a large room, so large that he was unable to tell how far it extended. He could see human silhouettes in the center of the room. Clothed in black, they were women.
2B?
He rushed toward them to check. Of course, they were not 2B in the flesh. They were her data. In the blink of an eye, he was surrounded by 2Bs. You don't have to use honorifics when you say my name. It's forbidden to have emotions. I admire your passion for knowledge. 9S, come on. Let's go home. These were definitely 9S's memories. He was being counter-hacked. He had thought he was doing the hacking, but he'd allowed the enemy to invade his mind. A black shadow materialized in the center of the room. It was the enemy that had counter-hacked him. The shadow swallowed 2B's data, one piece after another.
Stop!
The shadow persisted. It ate his memories of 2B. The look that she made when she was confused, the rare moments when she expressed anger, and the time she looked back at him.
Stop it!
He hurled himself into the shadows.
Don't invade my memories!
He held down the shadow and constricted him. He was beating down the enemy that had tried to take his precious treasures away.
Don't mess with my memories!
In a flash, he found himself holding a sword. He stabbed the shadow over and over and over. He straddled the shadow, continued to stab it. He realized that the shadow had 2B's face. Even then, he kept stabbing it. Red liquid sprayed out.
This is my memory! This is my memory. This 2B is mine, and mine only. 2B is mine.
He kept stabbing until its chest was a mangled mess. When he looked down, his hands were covered. Not in red liquid, but instead of a black and viscous substance. The enemy he had been stabbing was not 2B. It was the core of the soul box. 9S stood up. He heard the sword clatter to the floor.
What was I doing?
The back of his throat trembled. Laughter welled up.
I'll kill anyone that hurts Tubby. I'll kill anyone that touches Tubby. I'll kill anyone that comes near Tubby. I'll kill anyone that looks at Tubby. The only one allowed to look at Tubby is me. The only one allowed to come near Tubby is me. The only one allowed to touch Tubby is me. The only one allowed to hurt Tubby is me. The only...
His laughter didn't stop. Standing there, bent over, 9S kept laughing. After leaving the flooded city, 9S temporarily returned to the resistance camp. His close combat fighting management system had been severely damaged, and he was having trouble with sustained fighting. He couldn't even draw his sword. Devola and Popola took one glance at 9S, then screeched in horror. He was apparently in gruesome condition. Before Pod could give an explanation, Devola and Popola detected the damaged areas and dove into repairs, as expected for androids specialized in maintenance. 9S ignored Devola, who had told him to rest a little bit, and made to leave the resistance camp. At the gate, he heard Popola's voice calling from behind him.
Hey, 9S, don't try to die on your own.
I know,
was all he answered.
It's not like I'm trying to die,
he thought. At the very least, he could stay alive until he destroyed the machines and killed A2. If he died first, he wouldn't be able to kill them. He never thought he would have such a strong intent to kill and destroy. He had thought that since Type S androids were not suited for battle, they would have less of a thirst for blood. Maybe that's what he wanted to think. Perhaps he held himself back with the excuse that he lacked battle skills. The same way he had held back his feelings for 2B. 2B had died, and there was no longer a need for him to hold back. He didn't have to hide his thoughts or his desire for 2B. 2B would never know about them. The moment he realized this, he lost self-control. He was unable to control anything. He could feel everything bursting. Everything shameful and dirty that he had pent up flowed out of him, bit by bit.
Like I care,
9S thought as he walked. He emerged from the underground waterway, passed through the partly busted gates of the amusement park, and cut through the square while there were no longer any machines.
Hostile android approaching. Switching to self-defense mode.
Again?
Spat 9S. He had heard the same phrase 3 times, and it was getting to him. Even if he knew this was the last time, he didn't change the fact that it was irritating. And again, the entrance had angelic script inscribed above. This uninspired process exasperated him.
Pod, what about these words?
Answer, labeled as God Box.
God? How dare the machines use such a word?
It was offensive for the plebeian machines to mention God. God was an entity humans worshipped, a being of the highest order. It was unacceptable for scraps of metal to speak of God when even humans had occasionally hesitated to do so. He would destroy every last remaining one of them, and in the most excruciating ways possible. Once he infiltrated the facility, he was met with the same interior, with machines that he was tired of seeing. This time, there was no treasure chest. As a result, he wasn't distracted by any questionable information. He hijacked the machines by hacking, made them fight each other, and they exploded. 2B had been infected by a virus, showered by bullets from other Yoha-type androids, and killed by A2. 9S wanted the enemy to experience something similar. This was the only time he wished that machines had emotions. He wanted them to feel the trauma of getting attacked by comrades and the anguish of being betrayed by their trusted allies. He wanted to hear the machines genuinely cower and wail in fear, instead of simply playing pre-recorded audio.
Report, excessive fighting strains to Cassis.
Pod interrupted his flow, its warning irking 9S.
Shut up!
Strain on the Cassis? Did he care? But Pod was being unusually stubborn.
Negative. This support program functions as an assistant to 9S. It reserves the right to concern itself with its user well-being.
Its nagging bothered him. It reminded him of someone.
Do what you want!
He yelled and left the area. No matter how fast he walked, or how abruptly he started to sprint, Pod followed suit. Even if he knew that was the nature of pods, He still hated it. 9S made it a point to stomp loudly as he stormed into the elevator. More than anything, he loathed the way he acted so childishly. In front of the core installed on the roof was an enemy he did not expect. It was not a machine. It was an android. Operator! It was Operator 210, who had been assigned to aid 9S. Normally identical to the other Yoha types, her eyes glowed red. But her appearance was different from how 9S remembered. She was in battle uniform. Why is there an operator model here?
Inspecting. Operator 210. In the previous distant battle, by her own volition decided to cover to Type B. Newly appointed as 21B, she was stationed on the front lines, and 4 hours later reported missing.
No. Before the previous descent battle took place, 9S had been nullifying the enemy's area defense system on Earth.
During battle, please stay as far away from the field as possible. A scanner model like yourself is not suited for battle.
210's words floated back to him. Right after the exchange, 210 became 21B and descended to Earth. Because he had replied with a mischievous answer like, "Aw, are you worried about me?" 210 had coolly said, "No, you would only be a burden on the battlefield." But in reality, 9S knew that she worried for him. She always did. Simultaneously, he was filled with a feeling of rabid hate toward the machines that purposefully made 21B guard the core of the God Box. The machine that had invaded the bunker had no doubt been eavesdropping on 210 and 9S. From that, they knew she was an individual that 9S trusted, and deliberately planted her as an enemy. They probably expected 9S to be conflicted, to fight under immense stress and confusion, and eventually succumb at her hands. They probably planned to watch him struggle, and laugh at him for doing so. Like I'd let them, he thought. 9S attacked with no mercy. Pod! Support with maximum power fire! It had not been long since 210 converted to Type B. She was most likely thrown on the front lines with little training, and was probably unfamiliar with the equipment and behavior of a 2B. If he could exploit that weakness, even as a Type S, he had a chance against her.
Please, refrain from conversation irrelevant. To the mission.
He almost stopped at the words that spilled out of 21B's mouth.
A single confirmation is enough.
She was only reciting phrases that lingered in her memory. Don't falter, he told himself.
Please, kill me.
9S widened his eyes. 21B's hand was shaking as it held her sword. It was unclear whether 21B's consciousness was the cause, or if the enemy was intentionally dragging out 21B's consciousness. Operator, it's okay. It'll be okay. He readied his sword and charged. His loathing of machines galvanized him. I'll kill you! Now! He heard a scream, but 9S was unable to tell anyone if it was his or 210's.
Another step. 8. To know was self-delivery from the mechanical parts. I thought it was a dream, but I was the when I met the first castle, the special concern. I had transmitted a revolving voice. And one that's what she wanted, but I was concerned that I was a dangerous thing. Just thinking about it again, this was time to ignore the box. I'm so lucky to apply for two. I was just doing that for age before to the support. As an after that, I figured it. I could not receive the order from B2. This actions directed to the previous user, 2B, as a final objective. Don't worry about it. You find that B2 doesn't have the ability to fight. If you should get tired of resisting that about the paper in my head, I would stay in this response in terms of its support. When I asked about the identity of the stage for shared interest structure, the only thing it said was unclear, but expected to be exchanged. Even when I asked about what was the space for her and also confirmed the Major's text. Inconvenient beverage for night maneuvers. The dog stood out of it trying to act like it was from my favor, saying things like, "Accommodation, gratitude to the support provided thousands of pages of deliveries." I was furious. Because and bullshit machines that kept my confidence. So much so that I was anxious to spend myself and kill them. That's why, but at this point, I couldn't do nothing. I had to pay for the sin of killing my comrades. Is that right? Then it cannot be helped. If it is so easy. Despite the emotional, its answer was surprising, sophisticated digital. There was something about its head, being penciled from her sword and sat down. A somewhat unsettled feeling overcame me. "I've got to 50. It asked in a bit of the roots. "Shut up," I told it, shooing it away. It informed me that its name was Pascal, and at this time, "Thank you very much." And so off. "Thank you?" I wish you used me with gratitude. Did I accept the order? Did I spare the machine? Number 2. Your life. An enemy's reaction was just how I imagined. Did I think would make this place tidy when I first discovered anything for myself? I had to admit that I was the only one who was above that of my comrades. And everything was like the same way. And then he and I took out a mission together. Was very engaged in extending the structure unknown in the Pacific. It was at all as the Pacific released and attack. There, both Anthony and his allies, who sent sealed letter and its number of few requests to confront, but none were acknowledged, and our powers were required. Eventually, that was all paid. Comrades were squadron, and Anthony lost combat resistance. At that point, he became fighting separately, and we must have both assumed different results of the same thing. Then I included truth, and fled the battlefield. Combat had been planned when I abandoned us at the start. We were expecting the 5th letters, but I would have got to the last number down. It seemed an influence on the worst extent. So expected. If she found out, she might be able to forgive. She would never be able to forgive them. Proof was that I attacked streets from the woods. That's number 2. This girl had that's a technical job. Her name was Tubi. She died. What? I killed her. She was affected by magic virus. I see. And without suffering, she was being considered, and I was grateful. He and I both executed crimes that are affected by magic viruses. To minimize their misery and allow them to die and control their consciousness. That was why we killed them. Everyone went through the consequence. Sensing that it was probably better for me to have conversations about the past, decided constantly to include. I asked if she could see my field filter, and for the most part of playing in the desert. Until now, I had been forgetting parts of the course for her service or needed organizations. The parts were specific to mechanics, so true, but functionality there was no problem. If not all the planets are affected by the virus, the user affected part, I would be affected as well. That's what I decided to ask me how long kind of confidence for a favor. But the resistance can't be stopped. If I was negative proof the part here, there was somewhere else to go. As I debated what to do, an enemy suggested something unbelievable. Pascal could makes field filters, so I should go get them from him. Pascal. You know, and his village is an exception. They were promised. But we formed an alliance with them, and extra resources are necessary. If you need something, you don't have any options. And we're not so focused to cut enemies who beat us up with flags. Even if I was a mini speaker, I didn't think I could flog this big particular piece of glass, but I knew that already. At this rate, I would be impatient about it. I could already feel some appearance of that taking spot. My jaws were stiff and difficult to move. As a result, I was frozen from walking. My head hurt too. At first, it was just a little pain in my left temple, but I eventually stretched it back and covered it. The pain looked like there was jagged instead of being twisted into muscle. He tried to tickle the tips of the colony like Pascal, location marked on the map. I was definitely good. I had been read like a book. I was thinking of visiting much of the brain would be useless to have. And said this was an exception, so perhaps I could get an exception as well. It was a bunch full of machines. It was there as machines at first sight, and I could get myself without allowed to see it. I was probably looking closer because of my feeling. I had to be. You are that person. Thank you for staring me right through. I already saw a machine twice, because I had seen the truth. But I had never been painted by one. Maybe it was fun, but even when Pascal inquired was puzzled. I was too astonished to talk. All of a sudden, the box was started to blow. Explanation. You have to create your structure established. Action. Obtain information from the system template and entity. Objective. Visit this region to apply filter. Request. View filter. I see. So that is the case. The thing is, right now we have to report we used to collect filters. Recently, there have been five machines already on this area. Affirmative. Collecting and collecting work. The box explained the situation made illustrative of its own accord. I was extremely upset, but my condition from depth was getting worse. I had no choice but to incorporate and treat this so-called rigid work. Report. Facility to piece advocate machine. Pascal. To be effective from a cost-benefit standpoint. Recommendation. Immediate initiation of a friendly relationship. Friendly. You have to be true. Peace advocating. What did a machine do about peace? This was just an exception. This was what I did due to an unforeseen accident. I had no intention of tying on being friends with a machine. The result of this came. I'll happy if you anything. At very difficult condition. If you didn't give anything in return, I would be in debt to a machine. Actually, there is something that can help me with. Recently, a violent machine has been kidnapping the children from their playground. I apologize for being so foolish, but I would like you to help me with that machine. You are the only one I can count on. Please. To think that a machine would ask for exterminate another machine. At any rate, this work is supposed violent machine or starving machine. It was not here for me that I could pay off the debts so easily. Thank you very much. You got rid of that for us. Please, accept this on contract. Now, don't be shy. I was not permission to repay that, but is more than that repayment. No matter how much I try to decline or stare at trying to be party, this contract imposes an interior of the commerce. With our peace advocates, we despise fighting, so we build this sketch. But since we discarded the weapons, we haven't had the initiative to perfect its powerful underneath. The machine at the heart of the area of the rigid block, and the machine that had just destroyed, though the computer was saved. The machines in this village were the defenders of the enemies with such caliber. Machines responsible for the death of the comrades, being paralyzed by the fate of other machines. The sight of it was extremely strange, comical, and even sad in a way. Sad. Why would I think it was sad? Within the village, there are individuals that believe the best way to practice peace is to destroy our enemies. Mrs. A2, what should we do? I don't know. Should you, Pascal, do you want to the socks then? I'm sorry. It's you. Very good question, actually. enemies in the name of peace. I was troubled. I couldn't have a good answer. But
Mrs. A2, if it's fine with you, you should stay next to the editor. I will get to accomplish much.
I told Pascal that I would, if I finished it, and try it back. I was getting out of the rush before I realized I forgot to check the reward. But what's this?
Let's play.
I don't have time to play with machines. As soon as I set foot in the village, I swore by machine rats. I came back because I'm guilty that I have to return a favor. Now I have to push me away machines. The brats will move in front of me. I'm an android. Your enemy. I'm going to destroy everyone listen to what I say.
So fun.
Why does that make sense to me?
Big sis. More.
Big sis. Can you ever tell me what I can do? A long time ago, the resistance I thought the cycle themselves a family. At the time, they were close to the family, and seemed to call each other sisters of the around.
Big sis. Make us your toys. We need toys to play. We need toys. They sell some at the armory in the village, so buy some there. Buy some there.
If they surrendered to my arms and legs, if I surrendered anything to them, they'd show up and experience a keen feeling. I envisioned and had small phases of resistance. The faces of the comments too. Why now? Why would those comments come to me now?
Welcome. Pause for the children. We're out of spot. I've only looked at the materials. The materials are written here. If only you could bring me these materials, the children would be happy.
The craftsman spoke all looking at piece of paper around, with a list of materials. Starting with a sharp wave, everyone in the office pushed. The only designs to trim the team's work with the self-understood thinking. Thinking out loud. My phone calls. The students were pushing. They probably asked for them to find their eyes of paper. Eventually, he does the pushing. With words in my face. I had much more so I wouldn't be able to. But if there were any account, the stove was burning.
Thanks for making us toys. This is our thanks.
I clapped my hand with my seats. The chief had probably gathered them up the village.
Thanks, big sis.
With this, I felt a bit empty the ground. I had up with one meeting from the resistance kind of village. I had to ask her to deliver a few materials to Pascal.
Can you hear me, Mrs. A2?
Oh, good timing. Pascal, I'm on my way to deliver.
Mrs. A2, the village. It's horrible. The villagers are... Ah!
Hey, Pascal, what happened? The transmission cut off as abruptly as it had started. Pascal's voice sounded urgent. I had a bad feeling.
Hypothesis: Pascal, a valuable source of information, is in trouble. Recommendation: check on status of Pascal's village.
I know, I told Pod as I started to run. I didn't have to go very far to see the gravity of the situation. There was smoke coming from the direction of the village. Pod, a transmission to Pascal.
Transmission unavailable.
Shit! When I finally arrived, there were fires burning in various places throughout the village. But the fire was not the only problem. Something unbelievable was happening in front of my eyes. Machines were eating machines. The ones doing the eating and getting eaten were all villagers. I headed further into the village, thrashing the ones that were eating. I heard a whimpering voice call.
Mrs. A2.
How many villagers? How many machines had I killed before I heard my name? Pascal, what happened?
I don't know. Some of the villagers suddenly went mad and fell upon and began consuming others.
What about the children?
I evacuated them, but the other villagers are...
At this rate, you're going to be eaten too. I'll take care of here, so go on and escape! After I pretty much forced Pascal to escape, I destroyed the rampant machines one by one. Villagers that had, until just a little while ago, been shopping, gossiping, and living a peaceful life. Though berserk, these were the machines that lost the means to confront powerful enemies. It didn't take long for me to destroy all of them. It was too late to save the villagers that had been preyed on. They were already non-functional. Fortunately, the children were unharmed. Pascal had most likely prioritized their safety as soon as the cannibal riot began. The children were all huddled in a corner of the factory ruins. It was difficult to tell Pascal that I was unable to save the villagers because I knew how it felt to lose comrades too.
Question. Cannot machines be reconstructed as long as materials are on hand?
No, we have a unit called the core within us. It is the unit that contains our personal data. When that is destroyed, it becomes impossible to return to our previous state. This time, the victims, including their cores, were destroyed.
I see. Every time I had thought machines in the past, regardless of how many I destroyed, new ones kept spawning out of nowhere. That's why I had the misconception that they were immortal. But similarly to our comrades that had their black boxes destroyed without personal data backups, Pascal and the villagers had a concept of death as well.
Report. Intelligence. There are multiple hostile machines in this factory.
Intelligence?
Acquired from the regional pod network.
You have comrades too?
Affirmative.
At any rate, there was no time to mourn the dead. Leaving the children in a hiding spot, I confronted the oncoming machines. The number of enemies was overwhelming, and it didn't seem like Pod and I would suffice for the task. That's right. The machines were never ending. That's the enemy we were dealing with. A familiar feeling of helplessness and despair washed over me.
Mrs. A2, I'll handle these enemies.
An unexpected savior appeared. It was Pascal riding a weapon of immense size. He had probably taken control of the abandoned apparatus. Pascal's weapon blasted away a horde of enemies. Enemy reinforcements arrived in waves, but Pascal kept fighting, showing no signs of backing down.
I have children that I need to protect.
His attacks were rather ferocious for a peace advocate. I heard Pascal scream,
I'll kill you!
A countless number of times. After we eventually demolished the enemy army and its fighting vehicles, Pascal and I returned to the children's hiding place. But waiting for us was an unimaginable sight. What awaited us was the sight of the children on the floor, still as death. They had destroyed their own cores. In other words, mass suicide. How could this happen?
I gave these children an education and taught them about human emotions and knowledge. I thought it would help them in the future.
But what does that have to do with suicide?
Fear. I taught these children about the emotion of fear. Without fear, they would have lost their lives by doing something reckless.
It had taken Pascal a long time to return to the children. They probably heard the sounds of battle from outside. There were sounds of explosions and clashes, as well as furious quacking. They were unable to bear the horror. They chose death to escape that fear. Pascal was slightly wrong. He shouldn't have taught the children fear, but instead should have taught them the fear of death. Humans initially designed androids. Humans were well aware of the fear of death. That's why our programs include an inherent fear of death. Without that awareness, as Pascal had said, we would be prone to dying recklessly by our own hands. But machines did not die to begin with, so Pascal didn't understand the fear of death. It was tough to teach the kids an emotion that he himself had never experienced. To put it bluntly, it was death. The ignorance of death, and not teaching death, was the cause of this tragedy.
Miss A2, I beg you. I am unable to endure this pain. Would you be kind enough to erase my memories? Otherwise, please, kill me.
I understood the pain of losing comrades. I knew better than anyone else the agony of living on with the memories of those that were dear. So directed Pod to erase Pascal's memories. After shutting down Pascal's memory circuit, Pod set a reboot timer. This would allow us to leave while Pascal was still sleeping. Pascal, with his memories erased, might be confused if he saw me, and I wouldn't know what kind of face to make either. Pod was probably being considerate in that sense. Pod, why did the machines ambush Pascal, even though they're part of the same village?
Unknown, but the possibility of a bug is undeniable.
Bug? From what? But my question was drowned out by an unfamiliar voice.
Hello, this is the Tower System Service. I have some exciting news for everyone today.
It was a childish voice. It was enunciating poorly, but at the same time seemed to be poking fun at us.
Activation of massive machine unit detected to the east.
Massive unit? It must be the so-called tower. What in the world is happening?
Unknown. Recommendation: gathering of additional information.
It didn't have to tell me. After making Pod determine the location, I decided to take a look at the aforementioned massive unit with my own eyes. Villagers going on a rampage, and the appearance of the massive unit. The fact that they happened around the same time was probably not a coincidence, and Pod's hypothesis of there being some kind of bug. Originally, machines were made by aliens as weapons of mass destruction. It was hypocritical for those weapons to dislike fighting and love peace. In the world of machines, Pascal and his village were the outliers. The more they deviate from a machine's hardwired purpose, the farther they operate from their natural instincts. Could that gap have been the reason for the bug? And the appearance of the massive structure had been a catalyst? In the end, this was supposition. It was just my hypothesis. That's why I was going to confirm it. The massive unit was in the amusement park ruins. It was an ugly building, as if it was made from random parts of machines patched together. Once inside, the interior also looked like it was constructed from machine parts. The building was definitely made by them. However, there were machine remains lying around. It seemed like a battle had taken place, and every floor reeked of a burning stench. The bodies were riddled with bullet holes as well. Touching the remains, I discovered they were still hot. They were recently destroyed. Every machine was damaged beyond recognition, nearly chewed to pieces. It was clear that attacks had continued long after the machine had stopped functioning. I ran toward the upper floor. It wasn't too late. I could catch up. Please, kill me.
Operator, it's okay. It'll be okay.
On the top floor, 2 Yoha androids were still fighting. One that had been infected by a logic virus and 9S. It seemed like the battle had gone on for quite some time, as both 9S and the infected Yoha were struggling to stand. One blow from 9S sent the infected Yoha to the ground. 9S probably thought that he had defeated her, but he was naive. Those kinds of moments gave way to opportunity. Raptors were most vulnerable when they were pouncing on the enemy. Just as I expected, the infected Yoha slashed at 9S. But, by the same martial axiom, the infected Yoha was vulnerable as it attacked. I didn't miss the chance. I stabbed her in the back with a military sword. I couldn't let 9S be killed. 2B wouldn't want that. Of the favors that 2B had passed on to me, 9S was mentioned in the majority of her requests. Once the infected Yoha fell to the floor again, I made sure it was inoperable by destroying its black box. 9S glared at me, his malice overflowing, as I speared the body over and over.